Hi, I'm Sharon Carroll and this is the guidelines video for the horse agitation rating scale. Now it's important to note that this scale does only assess the agitation level of the horse in terms of frequency and intensity of physical movement and vocalization. It does not directly assess the emotional status of the horse. So as you'll see as we work our way through this guidelines video, there are 10 behaviour categories that we score, and then there are also a range of incidental behaviours that are not scored as part of this chart. So you need to watch this guidelines video in conjunction with a hard copy of the scale. If you need a copy of that scale, or you have any questions about this video or any questions about the scale, please don't hesitate to contact me on the email address below. So firstly, looking at row 1, this is all about front leg activity, things like pawing, striking, stomping and weaving. And we can just see some examples of those sorts of behaviours now. Moving on to row 2, this is all about hind leg activity, things like kicking, swinging, lifting the leg high and stomping. So we'll just look at some examples of those behaviours. Moving on to row 3, this is all about when the horse simultaneously moves both front legs or both hind legs off the ground at the same time. So in its most extreme form, we're talking about rearing or double barreling, but it can be any time that they just prop those two front legs or those two hind legs off the ground at the same time. So we'll just look at a couple of examples of those types of behaviours. Moving on to row 4, and we're now talking about oral activity, biting and bite threats. So this covers quite a range of behaviours. If you have a look at column B, it might be as simple as licking objects or yawning, holding the jaw open, crossing the jaw, grinding the teeth, tongue flicking, pulling the lips back, etc. So now we'll just have a look at a few examples of those behaviours. And in column C, we're more specifically talking about them actually chewing objects or grasping an object, or performing bite threats or biting at the air, or performing the act of wind sucking or cribbing. Moving on to row 5, this is all about vocalization. And if we have a look in column B, any single high pitch or loud vocalization is counted in this category. Also, any amount of low volume or low pitch vocalizations. Whereas column C is when we've seen or heard 2 or more high pitch or loud vocalizations, or also any amount of rapid snorting. So now we'll just listen to a couple of examples of high pitch or loud vocalizations. Moving on to row 6, and this is all about forward movement, but it's not about the number of steps in succession because these horses are tied to a single point. They often only have the opportunity of taking 1, 2 or 3 steps. So what we're talking about here is the speed in which they take those steps. Are they just single steps or are they in quick succession? And also looking at how many episodes of these steps they're taking. So are they taking a few steps, pausing or performing another behaviour and then taking a few more steps at a different time, or have they only had 1 episode of forward movement in the entire video? Moving on now to row 7, and this is all about backward movement. And here we have exactly the same criteria that we've already discussed for forward movement, with the addition of any attempt to pull back being scored in column C of the backward movement row. So moving on to row 8, And this is all about clockwise or anti-clockwise repositioning of the quarters. Now, because the horse is tied to a single point, often they will pivot around that point, and that's what we're looking for in this particular row. Just like with the forward and backward movement, we're primarily looking for the speed at which they're repositioning their quarters. Moving on to row 9, this is about speed and intensity of movement. And in this particular row, we're being asked to assess the video as a whole and just to choose from one of two options. Do we consider the majority of the activities and movements were performed in a slow manner, or were the majority of activities and movements performed in either a rapid or an intense manner? So I've just got a couple of examples coming up of some slow and some more intense or rapid types of movements. Moving on to our final row now, row 10, consistency of movement. And again, in this row, we're being asked to assess the video as a whole. So there's some very clear descriptions there for column A, column B, and column C. But it's important to remember that consistency of movement does not have anything to do with intensity or speed. So whether the horse is intensely or rapidly moving around, or whether it's just moving around quite slowly, doesn't actually score any different in this particular row. This is just about, was the horse moving a lot during the video, or was the horse for the most part quite still? And we are just looking at movement, leg movement and whole body positioning. We're not talking about ear movement, tail movement, or minor movements. It is important to note though that it is in this row that we score repetitive types of head swinging behaviours. So just looking at an example now of some repetitive head swinging type behaviour. It's important to remember that there are a wide range of behaviours that horses may undertake that do not appear on this list of behaviours in the agitation rating scale. These are considered incidental behaviours and do not need to be noted. We can see a few examples of these types of behaviours in the following videos.
You're being a real pain.